Hello, everyone. This is Professor Hamamoto. It is October 11, year 2022, 3 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Welcome, one, welcome all. I envy you, for I have an incredible talk for you today. And as usual, day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute, the storyline gets built out in areas and directions that I never would have imagined. And that's personally one of the main sources of satisfaction, gratification, if you will, that I enjoy in researching these new areas. As you know, I'm not a repeater. I'm not one of the YouTuber echo chambers. I've been at this type of work for decades. I'm not a newbie, and I'm just telling people who are watching for the first time, don't bother recommending me see X, Y, or Z because there's a 99% chance I've already seen it. I've assimilated it. I just want to get that out of the way. Take a seat at the back of the classroom. Just watch and listen and exercise some humility as a student. Okay. There's a really nasty, it's a really obnoxious American national character trait. And that's the assumption that everybody's on an equal plane, right? And that's really what allows what I'm going to be talking about today. These people getting away with what they do is because of our assumption that what you know, who you've learned about a week ago about the New World Order, that you're on the same plane as me who's been studying this, who's dedicated his professional life to looking at these issues for decades now. All right. There are gradations of knowledge. You just have to um, go against the American grain. And we weren't like that, by the way. My parents' generation, I think it's a post-war phenomenon. The idea, it manifested itself in safe spaces and all the political correctness. That's like an extension of what I think most Americans share. Just check out YouTube and look at programs that interview other nationalities. Germans, they could be Japanese, French. They're speaking in English, and the people are talking to me. I said, what is your opinion of Americans? And I think we really need that kind of a sobering check by other nationalities, how they perceive. We're perceived as superficial, know-it-alls. We've got our business, our military business, political and opinion business, and everybody's national affairs, right? And that seems to be the consensus globally. The only one who seems to be the people that seem to be ignorant of that is us. So I'm just giving you this prelude here because I think this manifestation of you telling the professor what he should be reading and paying attention to is just one irritating manifestation of a cultural, national arrogance that Mexican nationals, you name it, Singaporeans, Japanese, they recognize this. It's kind of endearing to them because we're so jolly and we're always smiling. We're the shiny, happy people of the world as we go about destroying what we can of it, the people as well as the natural environment, right? So let's check ourselves out instead of pointing the finger at the Russians or the Ukrainians or the Chacoms or the North Koreans or whoever else is the national scapegoat of the moment. Because, man, we got some problems right here at home and right here in the great state of Texas, as we're going to get into today. Because the topic of today's talk is the death of Justice Antonin Scalia and the assassination of the Supreme Court. By that graphic that I posted for this TubeView talk today, right? The flag draped coffin of Antonin Scalia, or Scalia, however you want to pronounce it. I pronounce it Scalia. And as you might remember, he was an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court. And he was, this is a President Donald Trump nomination. See, who did he replace him with? Some other globalist character, as we're going to find out. I mean, that's a a job requirement. You have to be a globalist, particularly British. Yeah, that was Neil Gorsuch, and you have to be Jesuit too. It helps. Um, Georgetown seems to loom large, and Georgetown Preparatory School, that's the feeder school to Georgetown University and the entire Vatican network there. And yeah, we're going to touch upon um, Archbishop Vigano today as well, because he has something to say, or he had something to say, and I guess he continues to have something to say about the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C., right? And I'm kind of laying it out here for the beginning in a cryptic sense, but I'm going to tie it all together by the time we finish here. That happens to be one of the skills that I developed over years and years of professional inquiry and training and lecturing. I just, the people who watch me know this, but just for the newbies, understand that I have a vast experience in here. So just take a seat in the back and listen for a change instead of mouthing off like a typical American before you know shit. All right. Um, by the way, that humility really helps you in a professional setting, because what I learned from this, and this is what inspired today's talk. I'm not going to be talking about David Boyce. Like, I was pretty bored about this sort of self flat. He does humble brag, right? He's being humble, but while he's doing it, he's bragging about it. His greatness as a super lawyer, whose career, by the way, is beginning to tank. The people in his firm, the young, ambitious ones who had some semblance of ideals and values, American values, as well as moral and ethical values, they're abandoning his firm in droves. I just read this recently. But anyway, this inspired the book, and one of his chief weapons, and that's why I read these books, to get in their minds. Not I don't care about me. I know what I think. I want to find out about other people, right? So I read the biographies, the autobiographies as well. And his number one skill is not his intelligence, not the fact that he went to Yale Law School or that he has all these connections. It all helps, right? Social connections. But when he gets in front of a jury of your peers, right? They're people like you and me, and they, like you and me, they probably have a distrust and perhaps even disgust of attorneys. These smooth talking serpent like people, right, that speak with the forked tongue, right? You know that. And the judges, and there's a whole courtroom theatrical setting there. But he's very humble. He's like every man. That's his secret of being a successful trial lawyer. So why don't you try it out? And I'll take my own advice. I usually don't. I have 60 minutes here, so I don't have time to really screw around. But typically, when I go into a setting, especially when my reputation precedes me, I go in low key and I listen and I shut up. I keep my mouth zipped, and that's how I gather information. That's what he does. He questions a lot of people. He's even deferential, but man, he's taking notes. And when he gets you in a courtroom, he's going to slice and dice you, because he's been listening instead of talking, and telling people what they should be doing instead of listening and observing and analyzing. Anyway, enough of that, because I'm getting a lot of more young people. I guess your parents or grandparents are telling you to watch this channel to hear what a real professor is supposed to be like, instead of these parrots who are promoting GLBTQ and so-called critical race theory. And you know that if you're watching this and you're an undergraduate, you know why they're doing that. They're doing it as a distraction from, so that this type of really important survival level information is not getting through to you. And their regime's about to end, because most of you are, even at the undergraduate level, you're 18 to 21, 20. You've already figured it out. You're not going along with it. This is the feedback I'm getting. Okay, I don't want to take too much time with, with scolding people who are new to the site here. But it bothers me when I sit there and watch a 40-minute YouTube that talks to me about all these wonderful discoveries that some newbie made. Oh my God. I shouldn't even respond to those types of queries. It's just a waste of my time. So what's interesting about Boys, and I guess this is where he he learned how to be humble. Both of his parents were school teachers. And he says, he reminds us of that fact on and on. He's not some sleazy attorney who by age 30 was making multi-million dollars in these huge judgments. That he was really, not him, his team, his research team. And by the way, that's another factor. Uh, Probably 10% of it is trial attorney skills and your demeanor and your humility and not talking down to other people like the jury. But the other 90% is preparation, and that's what I do here. And I was just thinking, my gosh, with cultural forensics, I could be a consultant to these people. I wouldn't even have to wear the fancy suits and have to hang out with a bunch of other lawyers at the fancy restaurants where they go to craft their strategy. Chin Chin is one of his favorite restaurants in New York City. I was writing these down. Most of them are probably gone. That's the clientele of the people like French Laundry out here in Napa that I was talking about recently, as well as some of the places that Anthony Bourdain used to treat us to, right? Because we are the great American unwashed public who has an opinion about anything, and we're not realizing that we're being gradually put into the corn maze, right? But we're shiny, happy people, and we have an opinion about everything, and everybody's opinion is equal. So that makes us happy as we're being marched into the electric vehicles that'll drive us in an autonomous vehicle right to the gulags. Right, and I'll tell you more about that in a moment. So I was inspired by this, but it really didn't catch me, and I'm glad I read it to the end until the very last chapter of the book. And he's done some incredible cases. Don't get me wrong. He was the lead attorney in the Microsoft, right? Bill Gates, you know about that suit, and that was a setup. He doesn't tell about that. That was a setup to finally bring Bill Gates into the New World Order fold. He was exhibiting a little bit of childhood idealism, perhaps, and a little bit of recalcitrance, even though he's a second generation globalist. Bill Gates Sr. is, Planned Parenthood, all that. But to really drive the stake into Microsoft and to get him into the side of the Pentagon and NATO, they had to kind of go through this legal wranglings. And as a result, Boyce was paid off in order to that was his fee for his particular dramatic role in that one. He defended Gary Shandling. I don't know if you remember him, the Gary Shandling show. He's a comedian, really funny, very low key. I think he was the predecessor of Jerry Seinfeld. They had a very similar comedic shtick. That's Yiddish for act or an angle, right? This is my shtick, right? The disgraced professor who's been studying New World Order theory and was drummed out of academia because of it, who is reveling in the irony that these same assholes who kicked me out were locked down for 2 years at the University of California, Davis, and they got all vaxxed up and they're going to die and they're going to be ill. I mean, I'm not happy about that, but had they not laughed me out of the core and listened to me, they might have had a chance at survival. But you know how groups are. That's just, I'm part of this group. I'm a Democrat. I'm a Republican. Those are the communists over there. Those are the Chacons. But yeah, let's break out of that particular rat maze as well. So what was interesting, I'm not going to talk about Boyce, but I thought it was interesting because a lot of the breaks that one gets in life are kind of random, but they're always of an interpersonal nature. And what happened? And I love gossip. I love smut because to me, it's not gossip. It's smut. It's intelligence. I mean, if I had to deal with a David Boyce on one, I would know where he's coming, what his weak spots are, and I would use it. And by the way, that's how they handle him. They picked one of the reasons they picked David Boyce from obscurity is that he's dyslexic, right? They got to have some kind of physical or moral or perhaps both flaw, right? That's part of the extortion scheme. They got to catch you in bed with either a live boy or a dead woman as the as the saying goes. But that was one of his deals. But also, they caught him in bed with the wife of one of his professors at see, where was he? He went to Northwestern to get his law degree after he was in Redlands for a while. And by the way, he didn't even want to go to college. His first wife was very ambitious for him. Said, "You're a really smart guy, and you shouldn't let your dyslexia hold you back. Go to college." And sure enough, he had something special that the talent spotters were able to identify. And the talent spotters are there at the at all the institutions, but particularly the research one. Redlands is not really much on people's radar, but it is a global institution. In fact, I think that was where Dr. Christian Barnard had his operation, his clinic, let's say. I don't want to do a pun, down in South Africa, but Redlands University had a medical school where there was pioneering organ transplants, including heart. I'm just telling you that. It's just not some obscure place that he wound up at. But then he left Redlands. I don't know why. He only was 2 years there, and then went to Northwestern. I think back when he was studying for the degree, law degree, you didn't have to have a BA or a bachelor's degree. You could go in after a certain amount of credits right into law school. It's much more selective and much more competitive now, and it requires more nepotism than ever to get into the elite law schools. So he went to Northwestern, which is okay. That's in Chicago, but he was found in bed with his professor's wife. So it was an embarrassment as well as a personal and professional. This guy was cucked by his student. Maybe that's the certain mojo that people, he's a real hump lord. He could seduce his own professor. He was older too. Remember, he didn't go to college right away, so he had a few years of maturity on your average undergraduate or even law student, just like Barama did. He was older than most of the people there, and 2 or 3 years makes a difference at that stage in life. So anyway, the administration gave David Boyce the option of either leaving without prejudice, um, Northwestern Law School, or they're going to make it tough for him, or they would give him his choice of whatever university he wanted to go to finish out his degree. So his wife wanted him to go to Columbia, New York, which would have been a good choice, but Boyce held out for Yale. And that's where he wound up. And that's where I think he really got inducted into this whole New World Order, or let's call it the deeper state. It's much deeper than deep. I think they'd already tabbed him, but once he showed his mettle in the courtroom as a trial attorney, they said, "This is at a young age, relatively, like by age 30, he was hammering. So this is our guy, right?" So anyway, let me finish up that story with Boyce. The last chapter is about how Boyce was brought in. He was already super attorney, right? And he's still alive, he's still practicing. And all the young idealistic attorneys, as I told you, are leaving his firm, and they're going to set up competition, which is good. And I keep mentioning this because that's my approach to destroying these people. Let them fight amongst themselves, and out of greed, avarice, professional stature, all of it. And that's why I want to publicize, because I want to exacerbate. I want to throw fuel on the fire, so more professionals, whether in medical, teaching, or social work, or military, upper echelon military, or in the law field, or in legislature, government, keep fighting each other, because when they're at each other's throat, that gives us some breathing space. They're at each other's throat right now, because there's kind of a calm right now. Don't let down. I think everybody's feeling the sort of take a deep breath right after 2-3 years of that, because they're duking it out and trying to figure out who to screw over so they can get away with prosecution and persecution and retribution by the legal system, as well by the man on the street. That's what's going on right now. And I call that the Yojimbo strategy. And that's why I talk about Santa Barbara and who's screwing who and who wants to screw who. And that's why I don't call it gossip. I call it intelligence, right? And you say, well, why are you giving away the game? My strategy? Because human beings are going to do this. My revelation is not going to stop somebody who wants to get laid by, so and so for whatever reason, or wants to take payoffs. I mean, so I'm just doing, it's like jujitsu. I'm going with their energies. I'm going with their chikara power, what they think is their power, and I use it against them. And they wind up on the floor tapping out to me and to you. So think about that. Instead of mouthing off and trying to do everything, pounding everything like, oh, let's bomb those assholes with an atomic bomb. Let's nuke them. Let's drop the bomb on Herman Khan, and let's put Agent Orange and dioxin. Let's do it American style, just mean force. Let's try the jujitsu method, right? It's worked over millennia. This other new Macht, which is a German concept, Macht, power, is of relatively recent vintage, and it's not working because it's going to outmacht the people who are machting us. Yevgeny von Plauen and all the physicists and the psychiatrists, not all just the glamorous Nazis, but also the Jewish paperclip people who are mind bombing us. And by the way, I think that's one of the main reasons why there's so much overemphasis on so-called MK Ultra, because it makes us forget the fact that we're all on meds. We're all being Prozac out. We're all being opioid, OxyContin, right? I did a talk on the family that brought that to market. These are all the Jewish paperclip neuropsychiatrists that brought that in. So they're getting away with these crimes against humanity with MK Ultra right now, better than MK Ultra, right? Thanks to Annie Jacobson and the people who publish her, right? And won't give Professor Hamamoto a contract. I'm laughing at you fools from Smith College. The seven sisters, your daddy and your grandparents and were rich and you need something seemingly socially worthwhile to do. So you're in publishing, you're an agent, you're a literary agent. Are you working for the New Yorker, right? You're a journalist or you're a documentary filmmaker. But you won't give Professor Hamamoto the time of day. Well, that's okay. I don't need you to know what time it is. I'm just going on this rant so that other people know how the culture works forensically and how it's stocked with even people like you who are otherwise useless, except for the fact that you won the lottery of life being born into the Kushner family or someone, of that nature. You name them. Trump. Yeah, well, the Ivanka Trump. She's supposed to be so brilliant and beautiful, but hey, if her name wasn't Trump, we would say Ivanka who? Right? Zsa Zsa Gabor. We're going to talk about Zsa Zsa Gabor. So anyway, the last chapter, Boyce is called in by one of the top menches of the Democratic Party, Warren Christopher. And he was kind of circling. He didn't want to intervene, but he really wanted to be in the center of action. And he knew that was going to boost him up, even Boyce, up as a New York super lawyer as well as a DC power political player. Oh, by the way, I should mention that Boyce got a huge judgment out of the Epstein executors for one of his clients who claimed that she was molested. And there's some question about that by Jeffrey Epstein. It wasn't, I can't remember, what's her name? Virginia Giuffre. It was some other, there was a number of people like that. So that makes him the good guy, right? And he had to redeem himself after representing Weinstein, which really pissed off a lot of the really smart, ambitious, younger female attorneys. And I think at his peak, he had like 200, expectant partners, right? Huge firm. And by the way, that's why his firm can take some of the losers, because they have so many attorneys there that there's money coming in. They can kind of amortize the causes, the pro bono, right? Causes that make them look good, even though they're a bunch of predators. Because one of the other lessons that you should learn here, and you professionals out there who are watching, expectant. You're going to go in this area. You're going to be accountant. You're going to be a quant on Wall Street. I'm just trying to, help you from stepping on your own dick or getting your tits, caught in the ringer, as it, to be gender equal. I'll use two of those common metaphors. I'm just trying to prevent you from falling prey to this type of approach, because he says, he gives us the game away. He says you have to appear to be doing good so that you can do well, right? So they do have these sort of fake altruistic, little gestures there that you read about. It's humble brag. Him and his wife, his wife is probably the brains of the family. She probably, and his sons, because they're second generation attorney, they have to read and prepare all this stuff. He's dyslexic. Right, so he depends on them. He's their front man, though. He's like 6'2". He at least in the old days, he cut a good figure and he wore a suit very well. And as you know from the presidencies that we've seen over the last several years, that's all it changed. Look at Barack Obama. He cut a good figure and supposedly was smart. Anyway, I'm not going to go off on so I said, okay, this gets me on to Antonin Scalia, because he is written about in Boy's book extensively. He, as you know, we're going back to the voter fraud of 2000. We're still in the midst of discussion about voter fraud 2020. So I was especially interested in being brought back to year 2000 when Kathleen Harris, who was the Secretary of Voting for the state of Florida, held up the entire presidential election. Remember, it was Gore versus Bush. W, not GW, but W Bush. Right? You know who we wound up with, right? And you know the story. Yeah, okay. You don't have to put in the comment. They were both skull and bones. Blah blah blah. Woof woof. Right? I'm tired of hearing about the skull and bones. But and as you know, just to refresh your memory, the U.S. Supreme Court weighed in, and I'm still trying to figure out who invited them to do that. They weighed in and they said, stop the recount right before the deadline. It was their December 10 or 12, I think, cutoff date. And they weighed in before that. And what it did was give the election to Bush. And Gore came up with a magnanimous concession speech just to save the American Republic, as we were so fragile because our whole faith in the voting in the Democratic Republic. No, most people didn't care. Even boys admitted the only people cared were the people who were going to lose their jobs as consultants or as sycophants in D.C. in the Beltway, and the Republicans who stormed the voting off, and that worked by that. It was an effective piece of intimidation. So anyway, I'm not going to revisit that. You probably vaguely remember that. That's like 22 years ago. It's not that long ago. So anyway, I flashed back to that and I said, oh my gosh, now given what happened in 2020 and with whole Trump, because this book was published like I think in 1990 or something. This is before he represented Elizabeth Holmes of Theranos. Remember that Silicon Valley startup? And there was a woman with a deep voice who scammed everybody, including Boyce. He was on the board of directors. He also represented her. She's a jailbird now. You're in the jailhouse now. You're in the jail. Elizabeth. Yeah, baby. Oh, you know what? She's got a good bloodline. Her father was a vice president in Enron. So she's the second gen. Her father probably walked, and she's probably at some sort of white collar, like a Dinesh D'Souza type facility, right? They don't get equal punishment. They're not about ready to be buggered in prison like most crooks. Yeah, Elizabeth Holmes. By the way, I mocked her voice because, as it turns out, her real voice was in a higher female register. She lowered her, like what's her name? Humphrey Bogart's girlfriend. Lauren Bacall had a naturally higher voice, but in order to make it more sexy and sultry, and in Elizabeth Holmes' case, to make it more convincing to board members and investors, which she got Warren Buffett to sign up, I think it was. I mean, some real smart cookies. Although I don't know. It might have been a setup anyway. They might have been in. I don't know. Anyway, that's boys. Right, so he's been a player up till very recently. So let me get to. I'm going to have to really run through this. I might have to even revisit this later. But Scalia, although he did vote along with the 5 other justices of the U.S. Supreme Court to halt the recount, the recounting of the Florida state ballots, he did later on, because Boys was set up. He's a Democrat. He was sent up there by Warren Christopher and the Boys to argue before the Supreme Court. They already made up their mind, but Boys actually thought he had convinced them that they were going to allow for it. But as it turns out, he went to bed, and when he woke up, he found out that the Supreme Court stuck to their original judgment. But Scalia was one of 2, although he did vote, opinions. And as probably most of you know, he was known as the opinionated judge. Right? I thought that's what they're supposed to, but he was very vocal about it. He liked to argue in the chambers, the private chambers. He was the most contentious of the type person. He's Sicilian, and plus his father was a professor of literature. The professors love to argue and dispute everything, right? Like, how many fairies can dance on that? We love to do that, except we don't get paid at the level of Boys. We do it for free, we're like the Talmudic scholars, we just go at it hammer and tongue, and we get it. So that's his dad. So that's his, and he's also a Roman Catholic, and he went to Jesuit institutions, and they're used to casuistry, right? You don't argue a point whether it's right or wrong or ethical or moral. You argue a point so that you win, right? Most people can't wrap their minds around. That's why they keep flapping their lips when they don't know anything, because they're playing a different sport, right? All the Americans that the rest of the world laughs about, who they go over to Germany or wherever, and then they're the shiny, happy people that don't seem to have what those other people. I should say that what the people who are watching the American tourist, the average one, what they don't realize is the top 1% is eating their lunch, right? They're the Boys type people. They're the Warren Christophers, right? Those people are like super predators. So maybe sending a stupid, shiny, happy people, Americans, to Japan, to look at anime, the weeaboos, and go to China and do YouTubes about, oh yeah, this is how you get over in China. Maybe that's a psyop being done. I don't know. I've heard that some of those people that have channels are in intelligence, by the way. I'm not going to go into that. So it could be a psyop. Anyway, so that's how I got into the Scalia. So here's where it enters the picture, the skullduggery. And I'm sorry to make you wait so long. I hope the looky-loos have already gone away. That's why I gave that rant at the beginning, so that you wouldn't watch, if you're here. But the ones who know me and the ones who've been patiently listening to my pre-rant, here's the payoff for you. Dig this.
Opportunity to sit down with John B. Poindexter, the chairman of JB Poindexter.
I should explain it. John B. Poindexter is not the Admiral Poindexter that we're familiar with. This is another John B. Poindexter, and he was the person, I'm pretty sure, who phoned in to 911, I guess, the death of Antonin Scalia, who was a guest at his ranch, Cibola Ranch. I'm assuming that a lot of people know this. Sorry, that's why I'm skipping over. But for those of you who don't, that's who he's referring to, John B. Poindexter. And hold on, you're going to see the business face of John B. Poindexter, but we're going to get into the secret society, John B. Poindexter, as well, because as you know, this is part of the full spectrum domination. The Pentagon and NATO and intelligence agencies, about NQTEL, right? They have businesses, they have huge corporate entities that fund their operation with their black budget, and all of the appropriations they get from Congress. That's like icing on the cake. So this is John B. Poindexter.
Dexter and Company, the parent company of Truck Accessories Group.
What makes you passionate about this industry?
I'm passionate about business. I think the task of fulfilling people's needs in the private sector is something that deserves our passion an elevated sense of responsibility and duty. We are, after all, I am responsible for 5,000 up and down team members, as we call our employees, executives and workforce, and probably triple that number of dependents. So we have a large responsibility, and
I like what he's saying. I don't think anybody will disagree with that, but that's part of the PSYOP, is it not? Let me move into it a little bit more.
large personal
Details tonight about the fight.
My family
911 operator.
is the
Okay,
most sizable customer.
Here's his most recent project. He does these vehicles. I guess there's kind of like RVs, but he's committed to the electronic autonomous vehicle. So this is where he intersects, and I begin to understand why he's in transportation. And you know about the air civil transport and the Flying Tiger and the trucking companies. And he was a veteran of the Vietnam War. I should tell you very quickly, he was in Cambodia. He was in North Vietnam. I'm not saying he was involved in the heroin trade, you know, the Golden Triangle, Thailand, and all that stuff, but I wouldn't be surprised. And transportation is a very important part of that. And by the way, his operation is right on the U.S.-Mexico border. So you draw your own conclusions, right? Don't be fooled by the down-home accent. He's a third-generation Texan, by the way, but he has a master's degree from New York University in accounting and business. And I think he graduated from the University of Arkansas early. Maybe he got, exposed to the Rockefeller people out there in Hot Spring, kind of like Billy Boy Clinton, right? He went to university. He was a Razorback, John B. Poindexter, and he got a PhD in quantitative methods in the business from the Stern School of Business, which I used to walk by every day. It's right across the street from Washington Square. That's the Stern, right? And he's got graduate, and he's in He's quantitative methods. And I was going to go into it a little bit earlier, but that's using quants, and they use Asians. After him, they started bringing in Chinese, Korean Americans, who are always in the math classes anyway. And they brought a lot of South Asians to do the quant work at the PhD level or master's, so that the bosses can put out these bogus models to investors who can't read the stuff. Anyway, that's another story, but that's how he started, and that's how he got rich, and that's how he supposedly got enough money to buy thousands of acres in West Texas for the Cibola Ranch, where Judge Antonin Scalia met his death, as we'll get into right now.
The life of Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia and his connection to a prominent Houston businessman. Justice Scalia passed away on a West Texas ranch last month. He had been invited there by the ranch owner, a Houston Vietnam veteran named John Poindexter. Poindexter found Scalia's body and made the first call for help. Investigative reporter Jace Larson has obtained a new sheriff's office report, and he's spoken with Poindexter about his connection to Justice Scalia.
His death upended political traditions and caused a bitter fight in Washington. And it was all spurred by what happened on this remote, gorgeous West Texas ranch near the Mexico border. The final moments of one of the most powerful men in the country. The Cibolo Creek Ranch is no doubt one of the most beautiful places in our state. Its website, which lets the general public pay to stay on the property, shows unique views and promises excellent Texas cuisine. But on Valentine's weekend, its private guests were invited by wealthy Houstonian John Poindexter. There were about 35 people, including Justice Antonin Scalia. Poindexter, a well-known name in Houston's elite social circles, started on Wall Street. President Obama awarded him the Presidential Unit Citation in 2009 for his heroism during a Vietnam rescue. That weekend was the first time that Poindexter had invited Scalia to the ranch.
We had lunch, and then embarked on a tour of the ranch.
They spent time quail hunting.
Didn't exert himself at all, had a very pleasant time. He was, of course, his usual personable self.
After dinner, Justice Scalia excused himself to his guest room, the El Presidente suite.
He was tired and wanted to have a very long night's sleep.
It was the last time anyone talked to Justice Scalia. After sunrise the next morning, the group knocked on his door with no answer. But hours later, Poindexter entered the room after concern filled his mind.
When I found him Saturday morning, was in complete repose. He was very peaceful in the bed. He had obviously passed away with no difficulty at all.
This report from the Presidio County Sheriff's Office says Poindexter called the Sheriff's Office twice, trying to get the U.S. Marshal's telephone number. The sheriff wrote in his report that Poindexter, quote, then stated to me that this death was way beyond my authority and should go to the feds. I then replied, it doesn't matter who it is. It was still under my jurisdiction. The sheriff ultimately gave in and gave Poindexter the marshal's telephone number. The sheriff decided to head to the ranch and only learned on the way that it was Justice Scalia who died. Within hours, news started leaking. Though a report claiming that a hearse at the ranch was a decoy, Poindexter told me that's not true. It was later that night when a van came to take Justice Scalia's body to a funeral home in El Paso. In Scalia's room, police found a briefcase and his open suitcase. There was also a breathing machine next to his bed, but it was not on or attached to Scalia. Jace Larson, KPRC Channel 2.
New questions are being raised about the death of Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia.
I was literally stunned. I did not believe that in this day and time, with someone as important as a sitting justice on the Supreme Court, that you would have such a haphazard death investigation.
William Ritchie, former head of criminal investigations for the Washington, D.C. police, just wrote on Facebook, I am stunned that no autopsy was ordered for Justice Scalia. My gut tells me there is something fishy going on in Texas. Do you really believe that there may have been foul play involved?
I'm not suggesting that there was foul play. However, do a thorough investigation.
Justice Scalia was found dead in his bed in this hotel suite at the 30,000-acre Cibolo Creek Ranch in West Texas Saturday. The ranch owner says he discovered Scalia with a pillow over his head, but a local judge pronounced him dead of natural causes without seeing the body or performing an autopsy. That has led to headlines like this in the Washington Post. Conspiracy theories swirl around the death of Antonin Scalia.
Just basic death investigation. You make sure as the on-scene investigator that you have covered your bases so that there will not be any questions down the road.
Meanwhile, we're learning new details about the 79-year-old Scalia's health problems. He had a history of heart trouble and
Okay. Yeah, he was 79 years old. Maybe he wasn't in the best of health, but there's still some looming questions. Now let's get into the conspiratorial part of it, which refuses to go away, right? First of all, John B. Poindexter was the head of the U.S. International Order of St. Hubertus. Look that up on yourself, but it's supposedly a hunting fraternity. It's a secret society. That is national in scope. In fact, it was so awful that even the Nazis shut it down during the Third Reich. Interestingly enough, they reconstituted the International Society of St. Hubertus in San Francisco in 1950. Right, San Francisco, as you know, where World War II, the United Nations was ratified and all that, and all the negotiation. There was a diplomatic center for the Pacific Rim, that's San Francisco. But before that, in the formation of the California Republic, about the Bohemian Club, which has its headquarters in San Francisco. You can walk right by it. It's just a huge edifice there, along with the Federal Reserve of San Francisco. And all about the Bohemian Grove, right? But they were reconstituted after World War II in San Francisco by the Bohemian Club. So there's some connection there that still needs to be explored. And if you think I'm jabbing, well, watch this. Let's see here. Uh, This, ladies and gentlemen, is an investiture of members of the Knights, and they have this kind of it might be a military order of the International Order of St. Hubertus. And this is in San Francisco. I don't know what the church is or the cathedral. It might be the Masonic Hall in San Francisco. It's huge. It's a concert hall as well as a meeting area. And it's on the street called Mason Street, by the way. So this is San Francisco, the home of Freemasonry, as well as Nancy Pelosi and Gavin Newsom and the Getty family. So here's an investiture. I won't bore you with this too long. Just want to show you that I'm not making this up. You see the insignia? Okay, you get the idea. And this is the American political system. This is the global political system. And that's why all the moralism in the world is not going to change American society. You can sue whatever you want, take them to court. There's an underlying substrate, a metaphysical, spiritual substrate that needs to be addressed and written about and exposed, if you will. I'm not exposing anything. This is stuff I found on YouTube. They're right there. But I'm the one who's forensically putting it together and also arguing against these really sort of, I think, really lame, candy-ass approaches to because they want you to be in court. They want you to see. I mean, look at boys. The lawyers all the way at the upper, especially the upper echelon. It's all sewn up, all the way to the Supreme Court level, right? Scalia. He himself went to a Jesuit. This is after he got his law degree at was it Yale or Harvard, one of the two. But he went to I have it written down here someplace. I'm sorry, I can't find it right at the top of my notes here. But he went there and he got some postgraduate training, and so did it's usually in Germany or in Britain, in Oxford. That's the globalists, right? It's Third Reich. And you know that the royal house of Britain and the Habsburg people, Saxe-Coburg, it's the Coburg family. You know they're related by blood. It's a royal bloodlines as well as the Russian throne, right? Tsar Nicholas and Alexandra, right? Nicholas II, she was a cousin of Queen Victoria. You know the story. So that's the bloodlines we're talking about that was missed entirely in this whole discussion. In fact, I think everybody missed, including the people who are chasing Annie Jacobsen around with sexy Nazis and MK Ultra and Paperclip and all the other cliches. When I'm really tired, I'm not just tired of hearing it. I think it's the point where the noise, the decibel level is so high, it's become painfully counterproductive. All right, and so here's a I guess he's a Roman Catholic priest who's showing us the regalia, and the people who are in the pews sitting out there seem to be, knowledgeable what he's alluding to. It's 2018.
Does anyone know what this logo is the brand of? Some people are shaking their heads with great smiles. This might help some of you. Does anybody know what this is? More smiles. This is Jägermeister. In German, the word Jägermeister means master hunter.
It's not what you think, ladies and gentlemen. I'm beginning to think they're not talking about hunting animals, right? They're hunting humans. They're hunting human souls more and more. So that's your Jägermeister. That's what the Tula Society was tapping into in Central Europe. And that's why they felt that the International Order of St. Hubertus was a rival organization. And they had to get rid of them. And where did they reconstitute themselves? In Texas, in West Texas, where John B. Poindexter and his pals hung out. By the way, Judge Scalia, from what I read, was not a member of the order, but he was an invited guest. Remember, it was also St. Valentine's Day. It's like a St. Valentine's Day massacre, not of just Justice Scalia, but the massacre of the American Republic. That's in that casket was buried the American Judicial and perhaps the American Republic. Now that we know what 2020 is about, this is kind of a run-up to what happened very recently. That's why I call it the assassination of the American judicial system. So here's this priest talking about it with his little visual aids, and that, the reindeers, that itself has a cultic symbolism. That's their symbol of the international order. Okay, I want you to read up on that yourself. I don't need to go through it. That tell you that Count Anton von Spork of Bohemia, which is now part of Czechoslovakia, Czech Republic, was supposedly the founder of it, and how it was integral to the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which was, Habsburg at that time. And then the Coburg Gotha came in later. They bred in with all the royal families of Western Europe, including España, Spain, right? So I'll let you read about that. But in this article that I see that is authoritative, and this is what confirmed for me, says, quoting, the order was word is terrible. It was reestablished in 1950, and in 1966, the first American branch was established at the Bohemian Club in San Francisco. So you saw a more recent one, but it's been there for decades, the resuscitation of it. Okay. Now, let me conclude with Anna Nicole Smith and maybe even Zsa Gabor. But that part of Western Texas has been a battleground of all the warring tribes of Native America and of European America and Mestizo America for generations, right? But in modern times, you check it out yourself. I don't have time, but there was incredible Comanche versus settler warfare, and I don't consider it white versus Indian. I don't subscribe to the current historiography. I feel that the Europeans were another tribe. They might be Scotch Irish. I mean, be a lot of Germans, by the way, and they were blacks, and there were other Indians too. So this is intertribal warfare. The ones were from Europe, but the other ones were Comanche, who was a real badass fighting empire, right? So that preceded the rancheros or Cibolo Ranch that John Poindexter got money to buy and to set up where these people can hang out and talk business on how to divide the world amongst themselves. So there's already some serious blood that's been sunk into that whole. In fact, Spain once ran Mexico, what is today Mexico, and they went through a revolution very quickly, right? Spain was encouraging American settlers like from Tennessee and other parts, the eastern part of America, to come into the Southwest in this area so that they could be buffers against the Comanche, right? And the Comanche were so powerful. They before the European settlers came in, they had carved a path all the way down to Mexico City, which we talked about leaving nothing in its wake. It was just like a bunch of locusts came in and just took everything. They were like, I guess the best analogy, they're kind of like Mongols of the North American continent. That's not a good analogy, but it's the best I can do at the point. So check that out. I'm going to start reading up more on the Comanche civilization and empire. But let me finish up here. So that whole area, West Texas, Texas in general, has that background. And as you know, after World War II, or even during World War II, there are POW camps with Germans there, 50,000. I think that's undercounting. I think there were much more there. And as you know, after the war, that's where a lot of German scientists, intellectual labor settled. People like our favorite Dr. Werner von Braun. Yeah, let's not throw him out. I mean, I'm kind of tired of hearing him being name checked every other time, like it's some new discovery. But from this article, and this is a good site. I recommend. It's called "In Search of Black Assassins." It's written by an African American person, by the way, which is unusual in itself, because Black people, just like Asians, are cast into certain roles. They're the entertainers of the society, where your Asian people are the quants, or they sell ginsu knife, or that's like Yan can cook, or they're just funny, very entertaining people. We don't really understand them, but they can't do YouTube shows like this, like Professor Hamamoto, and really expound on civilizational currents at a much deeper level than the best intellectually prepared professional in the world, in the English speaking world. You can't have that. I got to be Mr. fucking Mr. Miyagi, right? According to Peter Duke. Um, and this is what I'm struggling against, and this is what I'm telling you, because this is what motivates. This is what that's my compare. That's what I bring to the courtroom. Boy's had his own chip on his shoulder. He had his own cross to bear. I have mine, and I'm trying to give you a little insight on why I have such a bad attitude and why my material is so good. Because on a personal level, it's personal for me. On a personal level, I'm being driven to saving the land of my family for 4 generations. Four generations. And you're going to listen to fucking Jordan Peterson, who's not even an American. He's a Canadian subject. All right. He's got nothing to teach me, nothing to teach you. He's probably an asset of the Anglo-American combine. Because someone asked me this, what do you think of Jordan? Because, he's supposedly in academia. So that means we're brothers. So he's not my brother. He's part of an enemy nation, as far as I'm concerned. And so is Gavin McInnes, by the way, who was the true founder of the Gay Proud Boys, not the guys who are in jail. He's the guy, and he's Canadian. He was an Infowars dude. And you haven't seen him lately. You know why? Because Professor Hamamoto has outed him as a Canadian subject, just like Professor Peter Dale Scott at Berkeley, who had an academic appointment with no seeming meaning or relevance. He was a poet in the English department, and a mediocre one to best, but writing all this stuff, good books, but it was always about America. And then British imperialism or French imperialism, the cocaine and the heroin trade was never part of the story. It's always America, bad, superficial, shiny, happy people. Well, I'm tired of that demoralization. So stay on your side of the border, and I'll stay on my side. Ian Fleming, the man called Intrepid, Sir William Stevenson, right? And all the Canadians who are working for American media, and all you Five Eyes motherfuckers like Trevor Noah and all these other people. Yeah, stay on your side of the border. I'll stay on mine. Because you sent all these Nazis into our country, and they're ruining America circa 2022. Let me finish that up. So you got Wernher von Braun, who was set up in Fort Bliss in El Paso. And that's Estados Unidos de America, El Paso. Right? That's on the U.S.-Mexico border, right? And by the way, that ranch is very close to El Paso. It's in Marfa, Texas, technically, but it's the next largest city is in El Paso. So that's where Wernher von Braun was and his associates. And there was a Dr. Hubertus Strughold of Reichsministerium Wilhelm Göring's Luftwaffe Air Force in his inner circle of the Vril Society. You know about Vril? Because I'm supposed to read, and I like his work, because I was like, yeah, you got to read so-and-so. He's all about the Vril and the Nazis and the flying saucer. I've read all that material, but this is 2022. This is Antonin Scalia, an associate justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, who was murdered, probably. So he was the inner circle of the Vril Society, and set up station of the U.S. Air Force School of Aviation Medicine at Brooks Air Force Base in San Antonio, just miles outside of Mexico. It's spelled Mexia, and it's not quite pronounced that way, but it's not Mexia, it's Mexico. But by the way, and here's where I said I'm going to bring in the pop culture money shot for you. That's also the hometown of Anna Nicole Smith. Remember her? She went to public school in Mexico, Texas. She's a Texan. And according to this article that says she was raised by an aunt in Mexico. His primary industry had been, since 1943, had been looking after 3,000 to 4,000 foot soldiers and officers of Reichsführer Heinrich Himmler's elite blood covenant Schutzstaffel, SS to you and me. From 1943 to early 1950s, Mexico to El Paso, running down to Houston and San Antonio. By the way, John B. Poindexter's family goes back to Houston, right? San Antonio became an SS Nazi corridor in Tejas or Texas. It stands to reason to assume that Anna Nicole Smith's family bloodline roots and her sudden mysterious rise to international fame and fortune within a satanic circle of Dark Messiah and the bloodlines of Wotan lies within the SS Nazi Texas corridor. Yes, indeed, ladies and gentlemen. And I even found that there's connection between the Gabor sisters. Remember Zsa Zsa Gabor and Ava Green Acres? I never understood what these, they could barely act. And they were like in sitcom. They were even in movies. The Gabor sisters. Yeah, they were supposedly from Hungary. We got to dig into their backstory, but one of them married a Hilton, as in Paris Hilton. Zsa Zsa Gabor's, I think, she was married 7 or 8 times. But I think her second husband, number 2, was, I think, Conrad Hilton. And they had only one daughter. So I guess that would be Paris Hilton's stepsister, right? These are how the bloodlines unfold, right? And if you're in the bastard line, typically they're not going to bring you in. Or if, let's say, your father has maybe a hearing problem or some kind of physical handicap, a limp or, spinal bifida or something, they also will not bring you into the family business because they feel that you might bring the family curse into it. But usually it's bastardy, and that's these badass bastards are the ones that really create the problems because they want to prove their legitimacy to daddy, right? Otis Chandler, whoever else is the big rocker, right? So anyway, maybe I can take that up a little bit earlier than the Nazi and the royals of the Saxe-Coburg people, because it didn't end after this after World War II. But anyway, I'm bringing these threads together. This talk here is in no way definitive. What my value is, I think, is opening these new areas to younger scholars and investigators and real researchers, not Googlers, right? People who will dig into this, follow up my leads so that we can get out of the cognitive cornfield that's been set up by Annie Jacobson and a bunch of boob YouTubers who keep repeating stuff and telling me that I got to listen to this, this, and this. Been there, done that. We got to move ahead. And it's not just a matter of ego tripping on my part. We're in a kind of a lull right now, but we're no ways near being out of the cornfield yet, right? 2022, we're still in a heap of trouble. This is still living with us. Chief Justice Scalia, I respect his stature as a scholar of law. I think he was compromised somewhere down the line after his postgraduate work, especially when he went to the Jesuit institution in Switzerland, by the way, of Fribourg. Fribourg, it's Jesuits in Switzerland too, which is, the banking center of the world. Right? That's where he got his tattoo. That's where he got tatted, right? That's where he earned his teardrop. All these guys have, and they were either in Germany, Austria, Switzerland, or more typically Oxford or Cambridge before they come back to America. So if you want America the Beautiful to be a free republic, we've got to say, stay on your side of the border and we'll stay on our side. And we're not going to be ruled by these people who have postgraduate training, by our enemies, our bloodline enemy, the enemies of the American Republic, who only wanted to build us up to a certain area of technology and prosperity so that it's a pump and dump scheme, right? Pump us up through the 50s and the 60s of the Beach Boys and the endless summer and the prosperity and the brand new car and the great, even the union workers were making good money and they could send their kids to state university. This is like my family, we live that, the baby boomer, and then the dump scheme, which started in the 70s, 80s, and now we're in the end game of it because now they brought the biologicals into it now. Okay. That's all I'm going to say at this point. I'm just ending on this note because I'm telling you, this is not just a fun, let's read Joseph P. Farrell, and read about the UFOs and panspermia and, which it's all good stuff. It's all relevant. Yeah, let's talk about Roger Corman, but I'm not in it for the entertainment purposes of it. The entertainment is just the portal for them as well as for us to develop a method. I call it cultural forensics, a methodology, a theory, and a deep understanding of what America is up against in 2022. It's not going to be found in Alexander Hamilton. I'm sorry. That's yesterday's story. That's so, yeah, and all the romance, all the nostalgia, and all the lawsuits is not going to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. What will get us out of it is to break out of the trance the spell we've been put under. And that's starting to happen. Ladies and gentlemen, you can do your part by supporting me on Patreon and also well as sharing this talk, especially to younger people at the university, because they're not getting this quality of work here. They're being distracted by, well, you know what it is. They're not getting, they're getting the shadow curriculum. This is the real curriculum that K through 12 students need to be looking at, and university and postgraduate work and the law schools. They need to be looking at these talks here, and they're beginning to. And I surprised myself. In the old days, it would take a decade, if never, before anybody picked up on your ideas. But in the age of TubeView and social media, it's benefited me. I'm no longer an outlier. I'm mainstream. Not that I ever wanted to be. I don't want to be part of any club that would have me as a member, as Groucho, not Karl Marx, once said, or is reputed to have said. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. Pardon my rant at the beginning, but that was meant to dissuade all the looky-loos and the know-it-alls from watching this. And as you saw by the end, we closed the circle between the death, which wasn't that long ago, 2016, of Justice Scalia, with 2022, and we also now understand what the election fraud of 2000, we have a better idea of what that was about, because now we have year 2020 election of fraud to compare it. That's why this historical study never ends, because there's always new sui generis, unique phenomena happening that help cast a light on what came before. And that's what I tried to do today. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate your attention. Please share this video, especially to the younger people who are beginning to form their ideas of the world, of society, of politics right now. And I don't want the so-called critical race studies people to have a monopoly on that. I want to get in there as well into their brain pan. And they're going to like it. This is fascinating stuff. Yeah, it's exciting. It's inherently far more interesting than Michael Omi and Howard Wynot, Racial Formation, which is a classic book. And by the way, I know both of them. I told you I was in the middle of it. So I speak from a position of standing when I criticized and said, oh yeah, CRT, it's bad, it's awful. Yeah, we got to get rid of it. Any dickhead can say that. All right. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Bye.